thinks that the answer to climate change is for us to colonize Mars. So there are ways that we can be incredibly brilliant but delusional. And I actually saw this bumper sticker in Hawaii, and I do think this is right. Humans are delusional. We can be not delusional at times. You know, like the Manhattan Project, we work together towards something. But going through our day, we are very confident about things, and we're really off base most of the time. We're delusional. Now, delusional is not a bad thing, right? It's helpful. It helps us get through life. It's being delusional about being delusional is the problem. So I'm nearing the end of the human behavior part of the talk, but there's something else that's not really human behavior, but it's part of behavior in nature that I wanted to talk a little bit about. And some people consider it the fourth law of thermodynamics, which is called the maximum power principle, which suggests that organisms and ecosystems self-organize so as to maximize their ability to degrade, harvest, consume an energy source. So trees will grow in such a way so that the leaves get the maximum amount of sunlight they can. Here's kind of a long quote. I'll read it because I think it's profound. What took place in the early 1500s was truly exceptional. Something that had never happened before and never will again. Two cultural experiments running in isolation for 15,000 years at last came face to face. Amazingly, after all that time, each could recognize the other institutions. When Cortez landed in Mexico, he found roads, canals, cities, palaces, schools, law courts, markets, irrigation works, kings, priests, temples, peasants, artisans, armies, astronomers, merchants, sports, theater, art, music, and books. High civilization, differing in detail but alike in essentials, had evolved independently on both sides of the earth. Those civilizations had never come in contact. Yet all those things came up and self-organized in order to access resources and develop political hierarchy. If you think about that, it's really profound. Humans are what's considered a eusocial species, which is mega social. We do things not just like a solitary wolf, but we do things in a group. Another eusocial species is the social insects, ants, hymenoptera, wasps, etc. So this is a leaf-cutting ant, and they farm leaves that grow a little fungus on it, and they eat that. And there's all different castes, but basically for 80 million years they've been a successfully stable species. They are the one species that by weight equals humans on the planet, termites and ants. I'm going to come back to that a little later, but basically I would hypothesize that human society is kind of like a board. Despite what we individually choose, there's this pursuing onward of the hungry hippo of more energy and more resources. This is kind of a key part of my talk, but I have so much in here that I didn't really have a lot other than this core quote, which is by evolutionary biologist E.O. Wilson. Selfishness beats altruism within groups. Altruistic groups beat selfish groups. Everything else is commentary. And this is, again, like I said in my intro, kind of the core of what we face, is we are group creatures. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we're helpful to our group. It might mean that we're really negative towards an out-group. So it's either helping our in-group or ostracizing and penalizing or going to war with the out-group. That is a history of all the way back to tribal times, how humans were. Okay, quick summary of human behavior. We value the present disproportionately more than the future via steep discount rates. We easily become distracted by and habituated to readily available novelty. Via natural selection, we are programmed to compete for relative status and resources by whatever metric our current environment dictates. Cognitive biases, our brains are like Swiss Army knives. We are not sentient or sapient in aggregate, but follow the momentum of the hive. So when we are born, we have all of this genetic baggage, but from that moment on, we're not gene fitness maximizers. We don't go out and try and have a lot of kids and get a lot of resources. We're adaptation executors. We look around for our cultural cues. What are other people doing? How will I gain status? So the way that we're gaining status now doesn't always have to be the way. And the currency, of course, is neurotransmitters. That we're not doing what our ancestors did, we're getting the same brain chemicals that our ancestors did. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is that the things that are readily available shout louder to us than biodiversity, climate change, peak oil. Those things are way in the future. They don't shout as loudly. Okay, synthesis. Where does this bring us? So this is a summary of the human ecosystem. We turn energy and resources into dollars. We turn dollars into feelings and waste. And I haven't talked about waste, so I'm going to do that now briefly. I would assume that 80% of this audience is relatively fluent in climate change, so I'm just going to have a few observations that you might not have heard or my take. By the way, I'm not trained in climate. I think it's horribly complex on top of things I already think are complex. I know 2 or 3 people that think climate is runaway and humans are going extinct by 2050. I know 6 people personally that think humans have nothing, a very, very small role in climate, and it's all a political thing. Probably all of those people are wrong. The truth is somewhere in the middle, but I don't know. I also know 8 or 9 people that were IPCC authors, and they are between moderately and extremely concerned. So that's where I hang my hat with what they say, as I'm sure most of you, unless there's some climate scientists in here. So this is the purple and blue is parts per million of CO2. The green line is the pH of the ocean, which is a logarithmic scale, and it has not declined that quickly in, I think, 20 million years. It's been a long time since it's declined that sharply. So this is the latest IPCC forecast of Celsius temperature rise in the next 100 years or 85 years. Based on various scenarios. Given what I've studied in energy, I think the top few scenarios are not going to happen because we don't have enough economically affordable fossil carbon to meet those. Now, there could be some things that are positive feedbacks that aren't, I mean, I don't know if IPCC is conservative or aggressive. I mean, it could be either. I don't think we know. But I don't think that there's that much carbon available. However, we could have a coal seam fire in China that burns out of control for 100 years. That's not in the models. So there's all kinds of, we just don't know. It's so huge and the risks are so scary. By the way, for those that don't know, if we do have 3 or 4 degrees Celsius, it's largely game over. It's very, very bad for the oceans, for life on Earth. And basically, in times past, some of the great extinctions we know were from large carbon pulses from various sources. So there was a summary for policymakers report in Science this week, and some of the things didn't show up in the IPCC report. This is the first sentence of that report. A central finding of WG3 is that growth of income has been the single largest driver of emissions. Of course, I can imagine why they didn't want to include that. You can see here, the blue line is carbon emissions per year. Slight little flat period in the 2007 recession, but marches onward. Now, one thing I think is all climate models that you read in the news stop at 2100, as if that's all we care about. So a lot of the carbon will continue to have impacts for thousands of years. So when we're talking about reducing our carbon budget, if that's what we choose to do, it's not for the next 20 years, it's for the next 500 or more. That is a major, major implication. But once I die, say in 2050, 2051 to 2551 mean the same to me. We have to keep the biosphere intact, if possible. Just real quickly, this was in Science this week. If the U.S. goes it alone and follows the EPA carbon reduction guidelines, this is what it does to CO2 by the year 2100 temperature change, virtually nothing. So it implies that, if it's going to happen, it's got to be an international effort. It's not just climate and ocean acidification. Humans are appropriating, depending on the boundaries, between 20 and 40% of the net primary productivity of the planet.